Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. We've got a different kind of video today. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I figure with all the things that's happening and how many times a week I tell people that you need to kind of prep up and stock up and stack your food as high as you can, I'm going to go ahead and give you some ideas on some things that you can purchase. Not specifics, but just some ideas, all the way from cleaning and non-food items to cans, spices, pastas, all the way up to your freeze-dried stuff, which is kind of the top tier of food because it's more expensive when you're prepping up. I want to, along the way, give you as many tips as I can come up with. I'm going to try to ramble through this as fast as I can because there's a lot here, and I'm trying to make this as short a video as possible. To get started, some overall tips. Number one, do your best to just find the best deal possible. I mean, that's just common sense, right? Look for things on sale. Look for discount stores. If you have a discount grocer in your area, check them out. If you have something like a insurance salvage type grocery store, both of those types of grocery stores, it's common for them to have bulk items for sale, especially things that would normally be sold to restaurant, cafeteria, school cafeterias, things like that. So they're large quantity things. Depending on what it is, you can get it a good deal and increase your stocks pretty quickly. So those are some tips. Also, when stocking up, there is what I call a working pantry and then your long-term food pantry. And the vast majority of our food falls into a working pantry. And what that means is this is stuff that's in rotation, and it may be in a weeks-long rotation, seldom ever. Could be a month rotation, could be 6 months, a year, it could be a 5-year rotation. And what that means is these are items that we use on a regular basis. And if the item would normally have a shelf life of 6 months, we keep about a 6-month supply of it, and we're constantly rotating it. So hopefully what we have in stock is never more than 6 months old, but we have at least a 6-month supply. If it has a year shelf life, we keep about a year of it if we can, 5-year shelf life, so on and so forth. And then we have stuff that will probably outlive us. And that's stuff that we just put away, and that's emergency foods. That's what's going to get us along until we're able to produce more. If the whole world comes to an end, and we're just not able to resupply for a lengthy period of time or maybe even permanent, the long-term food for us is stuff that is going to keep us afloat for 2 to 3 years so that we can increase our food production here on the homestead. And so that's the kind of stuff we have in buckets and stuff that we just put away and kind of forget about it for the most part. I mean, we still check it and inspect it and that sort of stuff, but we're not using it in our daily rotation. And how you get started on this, if you're just now getting started, you need to sit down and write out a list of the common foods that you eat, and then how much do you use in a month's time. So, let's say tomato sauce. How many cans of tomato sauce do you use in a month's time? Figure that up, and then figure out how much you need for 6 months and start working towards that goal. And when if you go shopping every 2 weeks, you buy a 2-week supply of tomato sauce in a can, and then do your best to buy as much extra. Maybe you can buy a month's supply, and then 2 weeks later buy another month's supply, and then 2 weeks later buy another month's supply. And if you keep doing that, it doesn't take very long for you to have 3 months of food, 6 months of food, a year, 2 years. I would shoot for an ultimate goal. An ultimate top-level goal of prepping is a 2 to 3 year food supply. And that's enough food for your family to live off of for 2 to 3 years. And the idea is, like I said, that's enough food to get you going, to hold you over so that you can develop your garden and the production of your property if the world comes to an end. If you're just getting started, that 2 and 3 year goal may be a little bit too much. So I would shoot for 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months for most people is actually doable, even though it doesn't sound doable. You're not going to maybe be stocking up on the higher end, more expensive foods, the luxury items, the snacks that you that you don't have to have, but you get. We're talking about food to keep you alive and nourish your body until you can, the world recuperates enough so that things start to go back to normal. On that note, try to only stock up on things that you currently eat or that your family eats. If you're finding things that, if no one in your family eats beans, if everyone hates beans, then stop stocking up on beans or learn to like beans, because it's going to make, if the time comes that you have to really start using your stocks, everyone's going to be miserable if they don't like beans. And that's a real bad place to be, because it's already going to be tough if it's an SHTF, and if you're having to eat things that you just don't like, it's going to make it rough. So try to stock up on things that your family likes to eat in your normal food. So I'm going to come around the table, and I promise you this will be the least professional prepping video of this sort that you'll probably ever see. So here. On this end, this is the non-food cleaning supplies, things like that. Have a thing of bleach. We typically keep about a year's supply of bleach around. The reason why is liquid bleach only lasts about a year. That's about the extent of its shelf life, 9 to 12 months. There are other ways to store bleach, but liquid bleach just doesn't last that long. But it is very good to have because it's extremely good at disinfecting things. So I would encourage to stock up on a 6 to 12 month supply. And for most people, that's really not that much, because most people don't use gallons and gallons of bleach. Baking soda, another good cleaner. It also has some, internal natural medicine uses, and it's very cheap. Baking soda is very cheap, and we have actually several buckets of baking soda. Vinegar. I have two different kinds. I have the white vinegar over here because it's typically considered more of a cleaning type product. I mean, you can take it internally, but it's typically used for cleaning. And then we have apple cider vinegar. And this is the kind with the mother in it and all that kind of stuff, organic. Stock up on both, but it's also good to learn to make it. If you have access to certain things like apples, you can make this on your own, and it's not really that difficult, but certainly stock up on it. It's a great preservative. It's great for cleaning. It's great. You use it in canning products, certain types of foods that you could can on your own. So make sure you stock up on your vinegar. Alcohol, and I'm talking the kind that's called booze. We don't really drink it, but we stock up on it. I typically get this cheap stuff unless I find something really nice on sale, but usually it's the cheap stuff. And the reason is because I use it mostly for medicinal purposes. And I know you're going to laugh at that, but I make herbal tinctures, and this is a key ingredient to herbal tinctures. It's also a good barter item. It's a good disinfectant in a pinch. And like I said, it's also a preservative. And it has an incredible shelf life. You want to make sure that your alcohol, and it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter. I get this because it's the cheap stuff. But you need something that has at least 35 to 40% alcohol content for preservatives and disinfectant purposes. And so stock up on that kind of stuff. Obviously toilet paper. I only threw that out there mostly as a joke because, well, I figured everyone knows about toilet paper by now. If you don't, then you've been living under a rock for a while. All right. I think that's most of the kind of non-food items. Salt is extremely important. I've done an entire video on salt. And preppers talk about it all the time, but it actually is. It's really important. So I'm not going to go into it. But stock up, and salt is not that expensive. Now, this kind of salt is the pricier salt. Still not terrible, but it's a little pricier, and we have a few of these. But we also have 55-gallon drums, a few of them, packed to the top of salt. And we buy it in different ways. The large, coarse rock salt, the fine salt, big blocks of salt. We have a lot of salt. And I really don't have a whole lot of money into it. So I probably got more money in the barrels that they're in than I do the salt that's inside of them. But salt is very important. Back here, honey. This is a big gallon thing of honey, 12 pounds. Honey has an indefinite shelf life. And it's Probably on when you're looking at sugars, honey is definitely one of the more expensive sugars to buy, but it lasts forever. I mean, it literally just doesn't go bad. And not only is it a good sugar, but it's great antibacterial. It's just extremely healthy for you. Along with that is something like this, and I'm going to bring it around so maybe you can see it a little bit better. This is blackstrap molasses. Um, it is another sugar that is typically not eaten a whole lot anymore. Back in the old days, everyone used blackstrap molasses. It's not used a lot today, so most people say they don't like it, but I think it's because their palates just aren't used to it. The modern palate isn't used to it. I really like blackstrap molasses. Um, and blackstrap molasses is cheap, and it lasts a long time. It's great in baking. We use it a lot for that, but we keep several gallons of blackstrap molasses sitting around, along with maple syrup. And I just realized that I did not bring an example of maple syrup, but you know what? You guys know what maple syrup looks like. Oils. This is something that a lot of, this is coconut and this is olive oil. This is something that a lot of preppers struggle with because oils don't have a long shelf life. But they're really important. So we do keep about a year's supply, between 9 months and a year's supply of the more liquid oils. But I tell you, the coconut oil actually has about the longest shelf life of all the oils. And while it may not be the favorite of some when it comes to cooking, although some people love to cook with coconut oil, and sometimes it does leave a little bit of a coconut flavor, depending on what kind you're using. But it has a very long shelf life as compared to things like olive oils and avocado oils, things like that. So we keep a pretty good supply of coconut oil because of that purpose. Now, moving on to this, actually probably needs to move down. We're going to talk about condiments and spices, things like that. Most condiments have a very long shelf life, much longer than what's on the label. And this is something I haven't mentioned yet. In case you aren't aware of, these numbers, the dates, are not expiration dates on food. These are best if used by dates. I'm smacking my microphone, so I'm hoping it's not too bad. That doesn't mean that the food expires on that date. So if you have something that says December of 2020 and it's sealed up, like this is ketchup, that doesn't mean it's bad past on January of 2021. That means that according to the manufacturer, they believe it will be the absolute freshest if it's used by then. Most of these dates are typically put on here for legal purposes so that they can say, oh, well, we warned them, don't use it by that. But depending on the product, you can use something that's several years past that date. It really just depends on how it's packaged and the amount of preservatives. And typically, condiments, say like this is a chili sauce, Tabasco sauce, mustards, ketchups, they have enough preservatives and natural and unnatural in them usually for them to last a very long time. So stock up on those things. And you know what? The condiments and the spices, which is this kind of stuff down here, you need to have a bunch of that stuff, probably more than what you expect, because if you're stocking up on a lot of the big stuff like the beans and rice, and if that's a big part of your diet plan, if the SHTF hits the fan, you're going to get tired of just beans and rice. So that's why you need salt, seasonings, condiments, things like that, because it will make the foods that you're eating or that you have to eat to survive off of much more palatable. So stock up on that. Also, coffee. Coffee is a great, it's a mood enhancer, and most people like coffee. It's a great bartering tool. I don't particularly like this coffee, but this is about, and it's Walmart. I know, I hate going to Walmart, but this is probably the cheapest instant coffee that I have found on the market is the Walmart brand, and it has an indefinite shelf life. But I also stock up and store green unroasted coffee beans because I roast my own coffee. But this is backup kind of stuff. Good bartering. Canned goods, not going to cover that very much. Everyone should know about your canned goods. And again, as long as they're not dented, as long as they're not rusted and stuff, they will most likely always last well past any expiration date that's put on them. So don't worry about that. You know, if you pick up a can, it's like, oh, it's been expired for 6 months. As long as the can's not all tore up, it's probably pretty good. And then all you got to do is, you know, for me, I open it, I inspect it. If I think that it's a little iffy, but take care of your food, store it properly in a decent climate controlled at fairly cool temperatures, not refrigeration, but you don't want it to get too warm. All right, on to the next thing. We're going to talk about grains and pastas, and I just pulled these out as examples because everyone kind of knows about grains and pastas. Lots of pastas, and if you store them where they're pretty dry, they will last a very, very long time. Most pastas, if they're stored to where moisture doesn't get to them, will last well over 20 years. Same thing with whole grains. Now this is already sealed up because we eat a lot of oatmeal, but we also buy oatmeal and other grains, whole grains, in 20 and 50-pound 50-pound bags. And those are also what we would put in the buckets over here, and I'll mention those here in just a second. Now, I'm going to come back around and show you something that seems debatable with a lot of people. Oh, soups. And you can also get soups, those are in the can, obviously, but you can also get soups in these kind of sealed up things. I haven't really put them to the test to see if I think that they last as long as a can. I would just think that something like this is easier to break the seal. You know, it's easier to something to poke it than a can. But you know, when we find stuff like this on sale, a good price, we do stock up on it. Now, this kind of stuff, these bag soups and the bag pastas, they're basically freeze-dried and dehydrated products for the most part. And typically those types of products will last a very long time. But these products don't always last a long time, and it's only because of their packaging. They're usually not packaged in very thick quality things, and so they break down and they get a little air in there and then they start to spoil. So if you're wanting to stock up on this kind of stuff for long term, you probably need to transfer it into a better quality package, some type of thicker. And they do have a Mylar lining in them, but it's not a very thick lining, so you might want to stock up. And then stuff, I don't even know why I pulled this out here because I got a whole bunch of beans over here. But this is like peas. You can buy these in packages. If you're using these, and I'm going to jump back around here, I'm going to go ahead and go into the buckets, and then we'll hit this other long-term stuff. So with us, with buckets, we have 3 different ways of buckets. We have a bucket like this. This is heavy, but bring it around. Well, I just smashed that, so we'll see. This is Mylar. It's vacuum sealed, and this stuff will last. These are pinto beans, and I believe so. No, this is red wheat. Sorry. This stuff is going to last probably 30 plus years because it's vacuum sealed in Mylar. So that's one way to store your food in buckets. Another way is not in anything. This is a food grade bucket. It was clean and sterilized, but this is what we use out of. So this is, for instance, white rice. We have one with flour. We have one with salt or sugar. These are what we're using in our pantry on a daily basis. It's okay to store it like this. They're food grade. If you kept them clean them out when you got them, it's okay to put food directly in them. They're just not going to last as long as if it's something that's sealed up in Mylar inside the bucket. So for a 6-month to 1 year pantry, just dumping it in a bucket like this works. And the stuff's going to last longer than in the original packaging. So if you have bags of rice that you're planning on eating over the next 6 months to a year, the odds of those bags of rice getting a hole in them, getting bugs in them, are a lot better than if they're in a bucket like this. So that's why we use buckets for this. We also use buckets, and we love buckets. We have lots of food in buckets. Here's another example. Yeah, you can see me. We store just regular stuff. For instance, these are bags of like granola bars and stuff like that. And we have buckets filled with these types of bags. And some of them, they're just for storage. We break them down into different sizes. And then we also would put some things, if we buy, for instance, the rest of this bucket, and this is just stuff I put in. This is pasta, but it's gluten-free pasta. We have a child that has celiac disease, so we keep certain items that are gluten-free, and it's an older child that's moved out of the home. He's on his own, but anyways. So you've got 3 different ways to use buckets. Freeze-dried stuff for very long term, loose and food-grade buckets that you're going to be using, within the next 6 months to a year tops. And then just to store things. I mean, you can use them to store canned foods. You can use them to store, stuff like this if you want to, keep it like that. Or mayonnaise, ketchup, anything you can store in these buckets. And the reason is it creates an extra barrier for bugs and mice. Now, I will tell you, plastic buckets are not mice-proof, okay? It will slow them down, but it's not mice-proof. So you can't just stick them in there and say, well, I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about, rodent infestation. Not true. You need to still make sure you keep on top of that. Now, you also, again, you need to keep things climate controlled as much as possible. If they get too hot, they get too cold, bad. And then you get in there and your food is trashed. On to the very last, we have dehydrated food. And then we have freeze-dried food. The dehydrated food is typically more expensive than just your regular food, but it lasts longer. We've got things like dry milk, potato flakes, carrots. Carrots. We have a few others. This is stuff that we actually got from the Church of Latter-day Saints store. There's not one near us, but we took a trip one day a year or so ago and stocked up because you can get stuff pretty good price. So if you're near one, you don't have to be a member of their church or anything like that. But they do have stores throughout the country, and you can buy stuff really cheap from them for what you're getting. Dehydrated stuff, sealed up properly, should have at least a 10-year shelf life and could be upwards of 15 to 20 years. Now, then we move on to the very last as I trip over a food bucket. We have freeze-dried. It's a different process. It takes a lot more money to freeze-dried food. Much more expensive equipment. We own a dehydrator, but we do not own a freeze-dryer. Dehydrator, home dehydrator, can cost under $100. A home freeze-dryer costs about $2,500. So it's a big difference. But the difference is the food retains its flavor longer, the nutrition of it longer, and it lasts longer, and you can make fully complete meals to where all you have to do is just add hot water. You typically find freeze-dried food in 3 different ways. Number 10 cans, small Mylar bags. You can even purchase this kind of stuff at big box stores. And then you have your buckets, and they come in small buckets all the way up to big buckets. And the buckets are usually broken up into week-long food supply, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, or whatever. This kind of stuff is definitely more pricey per calorie, or if a week's worth of food buying it this way is a lot cheaper than a week's worth of food buying it this way. But it doesn't hurt to put some of this stuff back, because this stuff you don't have to worry about. As long as it is not getting really hot in like a garage or a barn, and it's not getting mice in it, it's pretty much going to last for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and all you have to do is add some hot water. All right, folks, this has been a very long video. I apologize for that. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I hope this has been helpful to some of you. If you like this, we'll continue and do more. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.